Hey y'all, it's Kim. So I'm going through, they called it a torture report. It's actually not necessarily labeled that way, but basically, let me see. I have it in my description. Okay, the report of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Committee study of the Central Intelligence Agency's detention and interrogation program. So that's what I'm going over right now. But the first video is already up. It's basically the foreword and all that stuff and why they're doing the report. But here's some findings and conclusions. I'm on page 11. And then approved December 13th, 2012, updated for release April 3rd, 2014. Declassification revisions December 3rd, 2014. So if you're sensitive, you may not want to listen. I'm just curious about it because I was watching Tucker Carlson and one of the former CIA guys, John, I think it's Kirikou or something like that. He's like Greek American, but anyway, his last name, if I'm not saying it right, I'm not trying to be disrespectful because I know people get all upset. But anyway, he called it the Senate torture report. That's not the actual technical name. So anyway, but I was just kind of curious about it. What in the world were they talking about? I mean, yes, 9/11 was an awful, awful time for the United States. We're not going to even dispute that. But we do have to go about certain things, certain ways. Yes, 3,000 people or so died that day. I understand. So, I mean, I'm not approving or disapproving either way. I'm just curious what's in the report. Is it even accurate? Did they have video? Did they have testimony? Did they have paperwork? I mean, we know a lot of that stuff can be falsified. So, anyway, I'm really just curious about it. I don't know if we're going to need a trigger warning here because I don't know if they're going to go into great detail with the descriptions. But if you are sensitive, you may want to click off of this one. I mean, I hope you'll watch, but like I said, I'm really just curious what was going on after that time or during that time when they had these prisoners here in the United States. Like, I guess they held them at Gitmo, or maybe they were off continent or whatever you want to call it, like, because they're not, CIA is not technically supposed to work within the United States borders. So I don't know if you would consider a Gitmo like part of the U.S. territory. Is it in Puerto Rico, maybe? Isn't that considered a U.S. territory? Anyway, whatever. I'm not all up on geography, don't care. So whatever. But let's get started. So the committee makes the following findings and conclusions. Number one, the CIA's use of its enhanced interrogation techniques was not an effective means of acquiring intelligence or gaining cooperation from detainees. The committee finds, based on a review of CIA interrogation records, that the use of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques was not an effective means of obtaining accurate information or gaining detainee cooperation. For example, according to CIA records, 7 of the 39 CIA detainees known to have been subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques provided no intelligence while in CIA custody. CIA detainees who were subject to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques were usually subjected to techniques immediately after being rendered to CIA custody. Other detainees provided significant accurate intelligence prior to or without having been subjected to these techniques. While being subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques and afterwards, multiple CIA detainees fabricated information, resulting in faulty intelligence. Detainees provided fabricated information on critical intelligence issues, including the terrorist threats, which the CIA identified as its highest priority. At numerous times throughout the CIA's detention and interrogation program, CIA personnel assessed that the most effective method for acquiring intelligence from detainees including from detainees the CIA considered to be the most high value, was to confront the detainees with information already acquired by the intelligence community. CIA officers regularly called into question whether the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques were effective, assessing that the use of the techniques failed to elicit detainee cooperation or produce accurate intelligence. The CIA's justification for the use of its enhanced interrogation techniques rested on inaccurate claims of their effectiveness. The CIA represented to the White House, the House, or the National Security Council, the Department of Justice, the CIA Office of Inspector General, the Congress, and the public that the best measure of effectiveness of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques was examples of specific terrorist plots thwarted and specific terrorists captured as a result of the use of the techniques. The CIA used these examples to claim that its enhanced interrogation techniques were not only effective, but also necessary to acquire otherwise unavailable, actionable intelligence that saved lives. The committee reviewed 20 of the most frequent and prominent examples of purported counterterrorism successes that the CIA has attributed to the use of its enhanced interrogation techniques and found them to be wrong in fundamental respects. In some cases, there was no relationship between the cited counterterrorism success and any information provided by detainees during or after the use of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques. In the remaining cases, the CIA inaccurately claimed that specific, otherwise unavailable information was acquired from a CIA detainee as a result of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, when in fact the information was either corroborative of information already available to the CIA or other elements of the U.S. intelligence community from sources other than the CIA detainee and was therefore not otherwise unavailable. Acquired from the CIA detainee prior to the use of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques. The examples provided by the CIA include numerous factual inaccuracies. In providing the effectiveness examples to policymakers, the Department of Justice, and others, the CIA consistently admitted the significant amount of relevant intelligence obtained from sources other than CIA detainees who have been subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, leaving the false impression the CIA was acquiring unique information from the use of the techniques. Some of the plots that the CIA claimed to have disrupted as a result of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques were assessed by intelligence and law enforcement officials as being infeasible or ideas that were never operationalized. The interrogations of CIA detainees were brutal and far worse than the CIA represented to policymakers and others. Just know, yes, there may be some things in here that are like terrible. So just hang on to your boots, okay? Okay, beginning with the CIA's first detainee, Abu Zubaydah, and continue with numerous others. The CIA applied its enhanced interrogation techniques with significant repetition for days or weeks at a time. Also, I was going to tell you, if you watch a movie called The Mauritanian, it shows what we think the CIA was probably doing to detainees at certain prison. I don't even know if that was here in the States or not. Anyway, it's a good movie. So let's go on. Interrogation techniques such as slaps and wallings, slamming detainees against the wall, were used in combination, frequently concurrent with sleep deprivation and nudity. Records do not support CIA representation that the CIA initially used an open, non-threatening approach, or that interrogation began with the least coercive technique possible and escalated to more coercive techniques only as necessary. The waterboarding technique was physically harmful, including convulsions and vomiting. Abu Zubaydah, for example, became completely unresponsive with bubbles rising through his open, full mouth. Internal CIA records describe the waterboarding of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as evolving into a series of near drownings. Ugh. Sleep deprivation involved keeping detainees awake for up to 180 hours, usually standing or in stress positions, at times with their hands shackled above their heads. At least 5 detainees experienced disturbing hallucinations during prolonged sleep deprivation. In at least 2 of those cases, the CIA nonetheless continued the sleep deprivation. Contrary to CIA representations to the Department of Justice, the CIA instructed personnel that the interrogation of Abu Zubaydah would take precedence over his medical care, resulting in the deterioration of a bullet wound Abu Zubaydah incurred during his capture. And at least 2 others, the CIA used its enhanced interrogation techniques despite warnings from CIA medical personnel that the techniques could exacerbate physical injuries. CIA medical personnel treated at least 1 detainee for swelling in order to allow the continued use of standing sleep deprivation. At least 5 CIA detainees were subject to rectal rehydration, or rectal feeding without documented medical necessity. The CIA placed detainees in ice water baths. The CIA led several detainees to believe they would never be allowed to leave CIA custody alive, suggesting to one detainee that he would only leave in a coffin-shaped box. One interrogator told another detainee that he would never go to court because we can never let the world know what I've done to you. Whoa. CIA officers also threatened at least 3 detainees with harm to their families, to include threats to harm the children of a detainee, threats to sexually abuse the mother of a detainee, and a threat to cut a detainee's mother's throat. That sounds exactly like what was on the Mauritanian. The conditions of confinement for CIA detainees were harsher than the CIA had represented to policymakers and others. And I hope these people were fired. I mean, I understand. Let me just stop for a second. I understand how bad 9/11 was. I get it. It happened on American soil. We protect American soil. But this kind of stuff, I don't know, because I can see it from both sides, but I just don't think that they should have treated them that poorly. I mean, yes, they did it, but we're also, like she even said, and I have to agree with her on this, even though I know she was a Democrat. We are a country of laws. We still have to go to the court system, and I know that there's vigilante justice, but we can't always use that. Look at the thing with like Luigi Mangione. I mean, you can't just go around hurting people or killing people because you don't agree with them, or basically taking the law into your own hands. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. It's hard to know when that time and place is. I mean, but as far as what this sounds like is this continued, not even giving them, opportunities to sleep and stuff. I mean, even in jail, you at least can kind of get some sleep, maybe. But that's just like taking it too far. But anyway, let's just move on. Okay. Conditions at CIA detention sites were poor and were especially bleak early in the program. CIA and detainees at the Cobalt detention facility were kept in complete darkness and constantly shackled in isolated cells with loud noise or music and only a bucket to use for human waste. Lack of heat at the facility likely contributed to the death of a detainee. The chief of interrogations described Cobalt as a dungeon. Another senior CIA officer stated that Cobalt was itself an enhanced interrogation technique. Ugh. At times, the detainees at Cobalt were walked around naked or were shackled with their hands above their heads for extended periods of time. Other times, the detainees at Cobalt were subjected to what was described as a rough takedown, in which approximately 5 CIA officers would scream at a detainee, drag him outside of his cell, cut his clothes off, and secure him with mylar tape. The detainee would then be hooded and dragged up and down a long corridor while being slapped and punched. Even after the conditions of confinement improved with the construction of a new detention facility, detainees were held in total isolation except when being interrogated or debriefed by CIA personnel. Throughout the program, multiple CIA detainees who were subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques and extended isolation exhibited psychological and behavioral issues, including hallucinations, paranoia, insomnia, and attempts at self-harm and self-mutilation. Multiple psychologists identified the lack of human contact experienced by detainees as a cause of psychiatric problems. The CIA repeatedly provided inaccurate information to the Department of Justice, impeding a proper legal analysis of the CIA's detention and interrogation program. From 2002 to 2007, the Office of Legal Counsel with the Department of Justice relied on CIA representations regarding the conditions of confinement for detainees, the application of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, the physical effects of the techniques on detainees, and the effectiveness of the techniques. Those representations were inaccurate in material respects. The Department of Justice did not conduct independent analysis or verification of the information it received from the CIA. The department warned, however, that if the facts provided by the CIA were to change, its legal conclusions might not apply. When the CIA determined the information it had provided to the Department of Justice was incorrect, the CIA rarely informed the department. Prior to the initiation of the CIA's detention and interrogation program, and throughout the life of the program, the legal justification for the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques relied on the CIA's claim that the techniques were necessary to save lives. In late 2001 and early 2002, senior attorneys at the CIA Office of General Counsel first examined the legal implications of using coercive interrogation techniques. CIA attorneys stated that a novel application of the necessity defense could be used to avoid prosecution of U.S. officials who tortured to obtain information that saved many lives. Having reviewed information provided by the CIA, the OLC included the necessity defense in its August 1st, 2002 memorandum to the White House Council on Standards of Conduct for Interrogation. The OLC determined that under the current circumstances, necessity or self-defense may justify interrogation methods that might violate the criminal prohibition against torture. On the same day, a second OLC opinion approved for the first time the use of 10 specific coercive interrogation techniques against Abu Zubaydah, subsequently referred to as the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques. The OLC relied on inaccurate CIA representations about Abu Zubaydah's status in Al-Qaeda and the interrogation team's certainty that Abu Zubaydah was withholding information about planned terrorist attacks. The CIA's representations to the OLC about the techniques were also inconsistent with how the techniques would later be applied. In March 2005, the CIA submitted to the Department of Justice various examples of the effectiveness of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques that were inaccurate. OLC memoranda signed on May 30th, 2005 and July 20th, 2007 relied on these representations, determining that the techniques were legal in part because they produced specific actionable intelligence and substantial quantities of otherwise unavailable intelligence that saved lives. Number 6, the CIA has actively avoided or impeded congressional oversight of the program. The CIA did not brief the leadership of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence on the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques until September 2002. After the techniques had been approved and used, the CIA did not respond to Chairman Bob Graham's request for additional information in 2002, noting in its own internal communications that he would be leaving the committee on January 2002 or 2003. The CIA subsequently resisted efforts by Vice Chairman John D. Rockefeller IV to investigate the program, including by refusing in 2006 to provide requested documents to the full committee. The CIA restricted access to information about the program from members of the committee beyond the chairman and vice chairman until September 6, 2006, the day the president publicly acknowledged the program, by which time 117 of the 119 known detainees had already entered CIA custody. Until then, the CIA had declined to answer questions from other committee members that related to CIA interrogation activities. Prior to September 6, 2006, the CIA provided inaccurate information to the leadership of the committee. Briefings to the full committee beginning on September 6, 2006 also contained numerous inaccuracies, including inaccurate descriptions of how interrogation techniques were applied and what information was obtained from CIA detainees. The CIA misrepresented the views of members of Congress on a number of occasions. After multiple senators have been critical of the program and written letters expressing concern to CIA Director Michael Hayden, Director Hayden nonetheless told a meeting of foreign ambassadors to the United States that every committee member was fully briefed and that this is not CIA's program. This is not the president's program. This is America's program. The CIA also provided inaccurate information describing the views of U.S. senators about the program to the Department of Justice. A year after being briefed on the program, the House and Senate Conference Committee considering the fiscal year 2008 Intelligence Authorization Bill voted to limit the CIA to using only interrogation techniques authorized by the Army Field Manual. That legislation was approved by the Senate and the House of Representatives in February 2008 and was vetoed by President Bush on March 8, 2008. The CIA impeded effective White House oversight and decision-making. The CIA provided extensive amounts of inaccurate and incomplete information related to the operation and effectiveness of the CIA's detention and interrogation program to the White House, the National Security Council principals, and their staffs. This prevented an accurate and complete understanding of the program by executive branch officials, thereby impeding oversight and decision-making. According to CIA records, no CIA officer up to and including CIA Director George Tenet and Porter Goss briefed the president on the specific CIA enhanced interrogation techniques before April 2006. By that time, 38 of the 39 detainees identified as having been subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques had already been subjected to the techniques. The CIA did not inform the president or vice president of the location of CIA detention facilities other than country. At the direction of the White House, the Secretaries of State and Defense, both principals on the National Security Council, were not briefed on program specifics until September 2003. An internal email from July 2003 noted that the White House is extremely concerned Secretary Powell would blow his stack if he were to be briefed on what's been going on. The Deputy Secretary of State Armitage complained that he and Secretary Powell were cut out of the National Security Council coordination process. The CIA repeatedly provided incomplete and inaccurate information to White House personnel regarding the operation and effectiveness of the CIA's detention and interrogation program. This includes the provision of inaccurate statements similar to those provided to other elements of the U.S. government and later to the public, as well as instances in which specific questions from White House officials were not answered truthfully or fully. In briefings for the National Security Council, principals, and White House officials, the CIA advocated for the continued use of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, warning that termination of this program will result in loss of life, possibly extensive. The CIA's operation and management of the program complicated and in some cases impeded the national security missions of other executive branch agencies. The CIA, in the conduct of its detention and interrogation program, complicated and in some cases impeded the national security missions of other executive branch agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the State Department, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The CIA withheld or restricted information relevant to these agencies' missions and responsibilities, denied access to detainees, and provided inaccurate information on the CIA's detention and interrogation program to these agencies. The use of coercive interrogation techniques and covert detention facilities that did not meet traditional U.S. standards resulted in the FBI and the Department of Defense limiting their involvement in CIA interrogation and detention activities. This reduced the ability of the U.S. government to deploy available resources and expert personnel to interrogate detainees and operate detention facilities. The CIA denied specific requests from FBI Director Robert Mueller III for FBI access to CIA detainees that the FBI believed was necessary to understand CIA detainee reporting on threats to the U.S. homeland. Information obtained from CIA detainees was restricted within the intelligence community, leading to concerns among senior CIA officers that limitations on sharing information undermine government-wide counterterrorism analysis. The CIA blocked State Department leadership from access to information crucial to foreign policy decision-making and diplomatic activities. The CIA did not inform two secretaries of state of locations of CIA detention facilities, despite the significant foreign policy implications related to the hosting of clandestine CIA detention sites and the fact that the political leaders of host countries were generally informed of their existence. Moreover, CIA officials or officers told U.S. ambassadors not to discuss the CIA program with State Department officials, preventing the ambassadors from seeking guidance on the policy implications of establishing CIA detention facilities in the countries in which they served. In two countries, U.S. ambassadors were informed of plans to establish a CIA detention site in the countries where they were serving after the CIA had already entered into agreements with the countries to host the detention sites. In two other countries, where negotiations on hosting new CIA detention facilities were taking place, the CIA told local government officials not to inform the U.S. ambassadors. The ODNI was provided with inaccurate and incomplete information about the program, preventing the Director of National Intelligence from effectively carrying out the director's statutory responsibility to serve as the principal advisor to the president on intelligence matters. The inaccurate information provided to the ODNI by the CIA resulted in the ODNI releasing inaccurate information to the public in September of 2006. I'm going to stop it here. We'll start back up on number 9 on the next video. But anyway, this is kind of getting interesting. I'm just really curious about some of the stuff. But anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Have a great afternoon. Bye.